My wonderful, beautiful, amazing humans, my followers and fledglings. I'm Gabriella from Gabriella's Vampire Tarot. For today, I'm going to actually give you guys a bedtime story about the Casket Girls. Now, this is an interesting fact because technically, as I think the human actually, calculated, the day that I got turned into a vampire, and it was actually 1723. So I know it seems kind of like ancient times, right? But you know what's kind of even scary about the time? Is that was mostly also the time around how the Ursuline Convent sisters, or the Casket Girls, also ended up in New Orleans from France. Because the thing is, it's like there was like groups of women, they were mostly sent off, well mostly, because the New Orleans guys, they were kind of a bit on the rowdy side and stuff like that. They were kind of they I mean, they weren't really considered unstable unless you would pretty much consider that term appropriate, of course. So, these nuns, they pretty much, thought it was actually a really good idea with all of like the Pope's decision at the time and also with all of these like governors and stuff, that they thought, okay, let's just, send off, these unwanted women, also known as prostitutes at the time, in like, France for that matter, even in other areas like even Canada and some isles and stuff like that. And these girls, and they're not women, but they're girls, around the age of like 13 to 16, and they get sent off over to New Orleans so they become or so they can become, like wives and get married off to, to these guys, right? And this is actually kind of, well, what kind of puts me in a little bit of in a scary, in a, scary thought, because the thing is, there's this, the human and I were looking at some of these like historical facts, and of course, what I don't like about some of these historians is that they don't put down the date or the names of these people that come across these, facts and ideas. So, but anyway, it was mostly, when the Casket Girls, they arrived in Biloxi, also known as in the past, the capital of French occupied in North America called Louisiana. This took place in 1720. And so, but anyway, it's like these women, they had, like their caskets with them because, when they traveled all the way from France to New Orleans, they pretty much had to, gather all of their personal affairs and supplies and stuff like that. So, but anyway, these women, they had their caskets, but humans, they pretty much, or, the historians, thought that they mostly, it'll look like coffins and stuff like that. Because, I don't know who it was. And again, it's like I just don't understand, some of these historians and stuff like that. But anyway, when we think about, like, okay, let's say that this one person, came across them and they were looking through their, their trunks, their caskets, or their suitcases for that matter. And then when they open them up, there is nothing in them. So, and that's where historians believe that these women, especially, that there were 5 women that had their empty caskets with them, were considered vampires. Because, vampires don't need anything, which is actually just one big, huge fable. Because I always need, my own hairbrush for my own hairbrush. I have my own nightgown that I slumber in and stuff like that. I need all of my beautiful dresses and stuff like that. My gloves, my parasol. So, those are a couple of my own personal items that I would always carry with me and stuff like that. But anyway, it's like, so, when we're talking about, how the Casket Girls became vampires, with the historical facts in mind, it's time to talk about the paranormal tilt of these young women's stories. Most of the vampire-themed tales are centering on the filles à la cassette, also known as the Casket Girls, because fille means girl in French. So, but anyway, but perhaps one of the most interesting stories are those that centered around the third floor of the 1751 convent building, which to this day remains, like, one of the most haunted places in New Orleans. Now, I've never traveled there. The human actually went there once, but it was only just like some kind of like museum kind of tour guide, of visiting the haunted places of New Orleans, right? But anyway, it's like, so, these women, they pretty much, had, empty caskets, and then, a lot of humans, they pretty much, considered them, like, demons of the night and stuff like that. So anyway, the nuns that mostly, brought these women over and had them educated at the Ursuline convent, they pretty much just thought, okay, there's some kind of, demonic activity going on here and stuff like that. So with, King Louis the Fourth, they mostly, tried to get these, women, to actually become, spouses and, instead of, just become, prisoners or prostitutes, in France and stuff like that. So, but anyway, it's like, well, the problem was, is, it's like when people get too many ideas of wondering, goodness, it's like, I mean, the fact is, did they even realize, did they notice, like, that people were, that there were, dead guys around, that these women, like, kill off their husbands, their spouses, and stuff like that. I mean, that's the honest and sad truth about some of these historians, is that when they actually don't get their facts, or correctly or right and stuff like that, then you start creating all of these ideas thinking, okay, these women, they have empty caskets, so they're automatically vampires. Well, based off of what facts? Do they have canines, fangs? Do they have long nails? And well, do they burn in the sunlight, or do they get weakened in the sunlight? Do they crave, and do they need blood to live off of? Like, where do they actually come up with these ideas? But the deep and sad and honest truth, because then it makes me think about, looking back on my own existence when I got turned in 1723. The thing is, it's like, I wonder if, I was actually meant to be a casket girl myself. And that's kind of where I start wondering and feeling incredibly, so actually, I feel, blessed, on so many ways, that I actually am who I am today, and not that I'm actually just married off just to some random individual. I mean, that was what my father mostly, I mean, come to think about it, back on how I, grew up and was raised and stuff like that, it was like how my father, mostly had everything prearranged. My mother took care of, like the happy home, happy earth, happy family. She, made our clothes, she educated us and stuff like that. But the thing was, is, did my father actually, send my sisters off to New Orleans? And that's a very, very tragic mindset that suddenly, comes to me when I actually think about, because I was pretty much already, like about 16, 17, 18 years old and stuff like that. And, I had, younger sisters who were probably like 14, 15, 16. And then I still kind of think about, did are my sisters the five Casket Girls? Is that what they're based off of? I'll never know. I've never met the Casket Girls. I only went into hiding and slumbering. I escaped everything. But then I wonder, are my sisters the five Casket Girls that are now considered vampires? Did they get turned into a vampire? I'll never know. And so that's why, when he and I, my human familiar and I, we were talking about this, I just really got this such sadness within myself. I really thought, what happened to them? Did my father, know anything about what was going on? I mean, why did I get turned into a vampire? Did I escape, the Casket Girls? Was I actually meant to be sent off to France myself? I'll never know. But that's why, it's like, I really hope to actually see the Ursuline Convent someday, because if it is true that, despite that, of how, everything is all boarded off in the attic, I wonder if my sisters could still potentially be up there. And it does kind of break my heart, because I really wish I could have actually seen them. I really wish I could have always been there for them, especially, I mean, I love my brothers just as much, just don't get me wrong about that. But the thing was, is when I think about how some of these women just sent off, say, okay, just get married off, I don't care about your fate and stuff like that, as long as you pretty much, will do whatever you do and stuff like that. It kind of just gives me this real sad feeling within myself of thinking, am I a casket girl? Was that meant to be my destiny? Is that what the vampire actually saved me from? It's like, I just have so many questions, concerns, and worries, because I got changed in 1723. So, but anyway, I kind of wanted to show off. But if anybody has any kind of information about who the Casket Girls were, or any kind of like ideas about, if you guys have sensed anything, did you guys ever put your hands, your ears against the Ursuline Convent, for that matter? I mean, I really hope to someday actually, will attend, or, will meet, or, even at least do some tarot readings. I know about that Boutique du Vampire. It's always interesting to find a beautiful novelty shop. I hope to ever will meet, Miss Crandall, who's actually been writing a lot of really good stories. I mean, I actually purchased a couple of her books, and that's why it mostly, came to me about some of these stories about, her, her, literature about that stuff as well. But other than that, if you guys know anything more about the Casket Girls, please feel free to post and drop, any questions or any comments if, what your own personal experience was at the Ursuline Convent. Did you sense anything? Did you feel anything? Did you notice anything? So, but because I'm actually now beyond intrigued right now, because now that I'm starting to puzzle everything together, it's really, driving me into this real hunger and thirst to want to find out more about it, because I just wonder if if my own sisters could have been part of the Casket Girls. But anyway, just wanted to kind of throw out this bedtime story, and I promise I will never cause any horror, or nightmares in your current slumbering. So again, happy slumbering. Enjoy the rest of your evening whenever this whole video may take place and stuff like that. But I kind of wanted to bring forth this tale about my own ideas about the Casket Girls and stuff like that. And if you guys have any other information or facts that you guys would also like to bring forth, please always feel free and be welcome to post in the comment section below what your own personal experiences were. If you've ever been to New Orleans, or if you're a New Orleans native and stuff like that. But other than that, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I love you guys incredibly. Always feel free to browse my channel. Please feel free to always join if you want. But other than that, I love you guys incredibly, and have a wonderful, beautiful night.